I think a lot of people don't write because a bit like starting a business, we get nervous or we're fearful of the process itself. And actually the self-publishing route means that there's no real excuse not to start. You can self-publish. It's pretty easy to set up and do. So that should never be the barrier to writing if that's the case.
There wasn't an incident, but I was wondering why I was getting a little bit irritated with someone. And I was thinking, actually, it wasn't them. And it wasn't the thing. I think I was using them as an excuse for why I wasn't doing something. Actually, whether that person was here or not, I'm blaming them for me not doing something. I'm using that as an excuse.
I mean, there's also lots of diet things that have been debunked, right? Like whether it's the Atkins diet, whatever, that sold loads of books, and then they realise it doesn't, it's not quite as effective as first advertised, and no one picks those books up anymore.
Good evening, Nick. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Harry. I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's just back to you and me again this week. But I enjoyed having a guest on last episode and I'm in good spirits.
Yeah, change of pace. I almost felt like saying good afternoon a second ago because I'm looking out into what still is not sunlight, but daylight, even though it's now 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'm starting to finally feel like I'm coming out of my winter cocoon. I found this winter really hard. I mean, obviously last winter I was away for 3 months. And so I really benefited from that. But this winter, for some reason, has been hard. And the last week or two has been really good because a bit more sunshine. I was lying on the beach yesterday, having a conversation with a friend of mine on the phone and just feeling very blessed to actually have daylight and sunlight. So I noticed as well, I was scrolling. I haven't been on Instagram for a long time. I feel like I've been off it for about 3 months. But I was scrolling the other day and obviously it popped up my like interests. And one of them, obviously, I'll follow you. And, you posted a picture with you and I think a couple of pictures actually, maybe with you and your dad. So obviously it's March. So has it been 2 years now? 2 years?
It has just gone past 2 years. It was 2 year anniversary. Yeah. So well spotted. Yeah. Lots going on. I mean, funny enough, I'm not surprised by you coming out of your winter blues with 40 days of rain, whatever we had, coming out of kind of winter. At the moment, I should probably send a picture onto our Instagram channel really of what I'm looking at. So I've been staring at artificial light for the last 5 hours. And prior to coming on to this episode, I've just recorded an hour's worth of solo content and realized that my microphone cable had come out. So it was only when I went to edit it and realized I've got no audio, I've got to redo the work. So I've been staring into these artificial lights and that they are genuinely really, really bright. I'll have to try and get an image of them. When you're in this room for 5 or 6 hours in a day, it starts to, if my eyes look bloodshot, that's the reason why. But yeah, no, you're right, mate. So I'm deflecting probably, but my dad's 2 year anniversary's come around. Interesting, I said to my wife, I may have mentioned it on the show. I think I mentioned to you, I've had this kind of ball of anxiety going on in my tummy about, I don't know what it was about, just felt anxious or just like a gut feel. And my wife was like, I think you're pretty sure it's your dad's anniversary coming around. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's not. I'm not thinking about it all the time. Blah, blah, blah. But I had to say that 24, 48 hours after going through that day, I know it's just another day. It's a Remembrance Day, but it almost completely dissipated. So maybe that is what it was. I don't know, but it seems like it probably was.
I mean, it's interesting, right? It responds to things that we're not aware of.
It's like the body remembers, right? Isn't that a saying from someone said? The body.
Yeah, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
That's the one. Yeah, the body keeps the score. Yeah. But I was in London on the anniversary with a good friend of mine called Michael Campion, who has his own podcast called The Inner Game. It's a really popular show in Hong Kong.
Actually, you guys sat down live together.
Yeah, no scripts, live interview. I was on his show, he was on mine, and it was great fun. We toasted with a glass of whiskey in the evening before we got his flight back to Hong Kong, and we're looking forward to getting those episodes out. Obviously on a different channel. I was on the HR L&D podcast, but really fun to sit down live and do. I know we've done it at your house, but being in a professional studio, just chilled. Yeah, it was a good experience. It was a good experience.
I was wondering where you were. I was like, oh, that looks nice and comfortable and everything. So it was
good. Yeah. I'll tell you what was interesting though. So this isn't relevant to my listeners. I'm not suddenly saying people go out and get this thing, but talking about my dad, we've probably talked on this show about it. It always reminds me of one of the last conversations we had, which is the idea that failure, can pass, but regret lingers. And one of the things he was sad about when he left was the regret he was never going to read the book that he knew I've always wanted to write, right? When I'm writing it now, it's due to come out in October. It's kind of a biographical story or collection of stories that really go around my proprietary fear framework. So obviously I'm still writing that. It's not out yet. But I have got another book which comes out on Monday, which is not the book I think he was alluding to, because it's called The Payroll Pivot, From Invisibility to Influence. It's all about payroll, so I'm not sure it's going to be particularly of interest to most of our listeners. But it did remind me a little bit of going, you know what, since he passed 2 years ago, well, I'd never written a book, and I always told myself I wasn't good enough, or I needed more credentials, or it wasn't the right time, whatever. Because he made that one of his regrets at that moment, I kind of went straight into action mode. And this year, hopefully, I'd have been an author then of 2 published solo books. I know you've been on the journey before me, but I wonder if I would have done this at all had he not said that as one of his last things he said to me, really. And I think I feel quite proud that I've been able to honour him a little bit by getting them out. And this first one comes out on Monday. It's 75,000 words. I've sent it out to like 20 senior payroll directors and leaders, and the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive, which is great. I gave them a Google form sheet, and I've had sort of 8s, 9s, and 10s out of 10. So really excited for it to launch, and going through that process. And I thought, you know what? I'm sure most of our listeners will say they have a book in them. I know it's the old cliche, right? Everyone says they have a story within them. And I thought maybe it'd be a good opportunity for us to talk about bucket lists, or talk about how do we get up, from starting to finish, how do we get a book published, or whatever, because you've been there as well. You've been on the journey before, and I'm going to be in that journey from Monday.
I think it'd be interesting. And actually, what prompted me to write my first book back, I started writing it in 2011, is actually, I was at an event called the Yes Group, where it's a monthly event that was being held for 30 odd years now. And it has different personal development, business leaders, speakers, whatever, each month. And one of the guys who actually I was listening to again on Diary of a CEO podcast, I think he's been on now 7 times, a guy called Daniel Priestley.
Yeah, I know Daniel.
Yeah, so he was actually re-met him last summer actually at Mind Valley, and said, hey, what's up, sort of thing. And he had his first book, I think, called KPI, Key Person of Influence. And it was about, I think, 5 or 6 steps, all beginning with the letter P, about how to raise your profile and be a key person of influence. But one of the pieces was about publish. And it was that prompted me really to decide to publish a book. And I've done the self-published route with books that I publish largely. I think you're doing it with a publisher, is it? I think.
Well, yes, I'm working in conjunction with a publisher, but actually the publishing label I'm working with, which is Alembic, have helped me set up my own publishing label, which I've done. So I've now got my own publishing label, or I will have, which will enable me not just to publish my own books, but other people in my genre. So payroll leaders that want to publish their books, HR leaders in those kind of niches, so they can keep more of their revenue rather than give it all away to the bigger retailers that we know out there. I'm going to give them access to the publishing label that I've created, which also allows me to keep more of the proceeds as well. But so Influence Press is the publishing label we've created, which is quite fun.
Yeah, I did that with my most recent book. Created like a publishing arm for that. And I think my second book, the co-author that I had there, he had his own publishing arm, because the thing is with the publisher is that it doesn't have the same, you haven't got the same need for it that you did before. And a lot of the time publishers are looking for things that you're going to be providing, whether you publish it through them or not. I.e., do you have a following? Do you have almost like a business case for your book? Are you going to do all of the marketing promotion yourself in a way? Because it's a lot of it. I mean, most of the books that they publish, maybe 99 out of 100 are not going to make money, and they're looking for that one that will, or that kind of that unicorn. So yeah, self-publishing or creating your own imprint and doing things is a good way to go. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to talk about your process with this book and also the other book, because there may be different processes that you
they're very different processes, for sure.
And I went through 3 different processes with my books, because the first one was obviously a solo effort, as was the last one. The second one was a collaboration between me and another person. So, and they're all 3 different, very different processes. I think the most efficient process I had was the first one. I mean, truth be told, and I was listening to a podcast with Joe Rogan and I think Michael Pollan. Are you familiar with Michael Pollan? On the Moral Dilemma and I can't remember what his one was about, psychedelics and consciousness. But anyway, they were having a conversation and talking about different authors and different creatives, and saying how a lot of the time, and this might be someone writing a song or writing a book, they feel like it's not them writing it. and it's like a download. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but certainly when I wrote my first book, I had like a download. And so I wrote for 2 weeks during my Christmas break, and 90% of the book came out then. Now, prior to that, 4 months prior to that, I had been jotting ideas for chapters and also doing a lot of what I call photo reading or flash reading, where I read maybe 5 or 6 books in a week, but I was getting the information out I needed to be as part of the research. So it's a process where you almost like dissolve your mind a little bit and allow the information on the pages to be absorbed into you in a way. And I use that as a technique to get the background reading. So I had maybe 3 months before of prep work, but then 2 weeks where it was just a download over Christmas, and it was like proper flow. I wasn't using any stimulants or caffeine or anything to kind of get into this flow, which is what they were talking about, how they needed. And then it was maybe 5 months again of editing and rewriting and all of that. But the 2 weeks was the flow. Now, I never really got that with the other books I wrote, but that one, I definitely had that flow.
Well, definitely a different process. I would first thing I mentioned, just go back a little bit on your publishing piece. I think you raised a good point, because a lot of people don't write because they a bit like starting a business. We get nervous or we're fearful of the process itself. We think, I don't understand the process. How do I go about it? So I just won't start. And actually, the self-publishing route means that there's no real excuse not to start. You can self-publish. It's pretty easy to set up and do. So that should never be the barrier to writing, if that's the case. I would say that it's been a learning curve, having been writing 2 books alongside each other, of which they're completely different. So I've got one, which is the Payroll Pivot, which comes out on Invisibility to Influence, comes out on Monday, which is clearly for my niche in the industry that I work in as a payroll influencer, in inverted commas, or someone that talks about that space. So that's been a very different experience, because I've been utilizing podcast interviews for over 400 episodes, where I've been meeting with industry leaders. I've never processed payroll in my life, so I can't get into the technical detail of how to process. What I can do is give stories and observations of the people I've met along the way, and obviously through placing thousands of payroll people in my recruitment career, and what a good CV looks like and how a career should be elevated and all those things, and putting all that knowledge into a book. So I have used an AI tool to support me on this, not with the writing, just to make this clear, but what I did is I downloaded all of my transcripts into Notebook LLM. And then when I'm writing, I need an example, I can use LLM to sort of filter through all the 400 episodes of hours of content, my words anyway, guess words, to pick out the relevant examples for the point I'm making. So that's been something that saved me a lot of time. But it's still taken me 18 months to write it. My first draft in the mind dump thing was interesting. I did 125,000 words, and I got completely lost. And I couldn't. You get lost in the words anyway. I don't know how many times I've read it. I must have read over 1 million words trying to get these 75,000 out. It feels that way. But I got to a point where I met a book coach, and I was I don't know how to get it from 125,000 words into something that's consumable and reflects what I think. And basically, she's been wonderful. She's kind of said, this is too much information. It's too technical. This is, repetitive. So together, she's really helped me to crystallize my ideas, bring them into a really good framework so that it can be consumed much easier. We're now down to 75,000 words. The rewriting has taken forever, the constant proofing. And in a world, for the payroll side, it's constantly evolving. So there's always a new chapter to add before you publish. And I think that's been the hard point for me. It's like, I'll delay it a month because this is coming. You've got an AI development. We've got a new whatever. You think, legislatively, there's something changing. We're about to go into a new financial year. Do I wait till then? And you just have to have a close-off point. Well, so that's what I've done.
Otherwise, you end up like me 10 years later, where, some of my delay was that my book Super Vitality took 10 years to get out for some of those reasons. And some of the reasons that maybe some listeners are thinking about, okay, am I qualified to talk about this? Is this good enough? Hasn't this already been said before by other people?
Yeah.
All of these things that I didn't really have as a conscious thought in my first book. My first book, I was in a bit of a catalyst whirlwind year of changing my life and believing anything and everything was possible. So I just went for it. Whereas by 2015 to 2025, I'd kind of had a different approach. And so, I had all those doubts, and I never took it down from the 125,000 words. My book, I feel like the chapters actually are pretty readable. There's one big chapter, which is the food chapter, but the other chapters are pretty readable. And the way I wrote it, I'm not sure if this is similar with yours, it's not necessarily has to be read cover to cover. You can dip into if you're interested in sleep, you dip into that chapter. If you're interested in exercise,
yeah, no, mine isn't like that. Mine is definitely sequential. You need to kind of move through. I think what I'm really proud of in the payroll one is two things. The feedback I've had already back of those that know me is everyone's come back saying, Nick, it's almost like I can hear you talking to me on the page. And I wanted it to be my personality, me coming through. So I think I've nailed that bit. I think the second bit is I don't think anyone else could have written this book. And the reason for that is I've woven in my fear thesis, my proprietary frameworks, my IP around what I think fear is into the manuscript itself, because it's, the subtitle is Invisibility to Influence. So what does that mean? How does fear hold us back? How does it keep us small? So I'm really, really proud I've been able to weave that into a payroll book. I think also no one else really has my lens because I don't process payroll. All the other books that are out there in my niche tend to be written in terms of how to process, how to handle compliance. I think the difficulty is the bit you mentioned is how do I make sure it never dates? And that's been harder because things are changing. I've tried to write it in a way where, whether you're talking about COVID or AI or whatever, it's not so central that if you pick this book up in 3 or 4 years' time, it's out of date. And I think that's been quite a hard thing to navigate. I didn't anticipate that when I started writing it. But later on, I was like, now, 18 months on, COVID is even less relevant when I started writing it. I think you've got to actually cut and strip a lot of that stuff back. Yeah. And then the book coach I've been working with is like, you don't need that, Nick. Just make it generic. Like, what happens if there is a major incident in the future? It doesn't have to be COVID. Make it more relevant. So that's been a learning curve. Yeah. I think where it's been interesting is in terms of the other book, which I'm writing now, and I'm 9 chapters into that. I feel, because I haven't been working with the book coach on the second one, I feel like I need one because I've seen how much it can help me. And I think I've been trying. So it was interesting you saying you'd be reading loads of books a week. I've been trying to read absolutely nothing because I'm terrified I'll be influenced, subconsciously, and it'll find its way onto the page. So I have my fear theory, my proprietary framework so dialed down so well now that I don't want to read someone else's view and it to influence, or even listen to a podcast about fear and let it influence my words. So I found that quite challenging because it's a subject I'm really passionate about. I'm in the middle of my writing, but it's definitely sequential because it runs through my story from when I was a child all the way through to an adult. I've tried to make it really accessible. If you're no interest in fear whatsoever, hopefully the stories themselves are still relatively entertaining. So a very different kind of book. And I think I've gone from one which is quite technically sort of, I guess, got a lot of cognitive load on the first one, the payroll one, because it's for people that understand that space, versus a book on fear, which I want to be accessible to everybody. So I have to kind of make sure that the cognitive load isn't so high that people can pick it up, read it on an airplane, whatever, and get to grips with it. And then if they want to explore it further, that'll probably be book 2, where I go more deeper into the thesis. So I'm finding the fear one, which I thought would be the one I was I am most excited by it, and the one my dad wanted to read, the harder of the two to write.
Well, yeah, because it's, when it's your, I keep saying the word opus for my book. It might not be the right term for yours, but where it's for me, it's like almost my life's work or my adult life's work, where I'm putting it onto the page, because again, mine's about my leadership beat model, which is that, proprietary framework that I have for health and vitality and energy that many people have been hearing about from me for 15 years and even doing courses on it, but there wasn't anything on the page. And so that was really, personal to me, and it was hard because I wanted to get it right. But I kept having the phrase that I heard once from the founder of LinkedIn attributed to, where, if you're not embarrassed by the first product you ship, you waited too long. So it's this idea of, I'm not embarrassed, obviously, by the book. I'm very proud of it. But could there be more tweaks? Yes. Would there be more tweaks if I waited longer? Yeah. But then you're going to wait and wait and wait and wait because like you said, AI has come into it now and this is finished. And then you keep, and actually your point before about making it timeless is a good point. I think with the books that I've written, because of their nature, they are somewhat timeless. There may be the odd reference to,
I would agree with you. Someone has read your books. They are, they are relatively timeless. I think, unless there's some major breakthroughs in human anatomy and understanding, they'll stand the test of time.
Exactly. Whereas that's not to say that if someone's listening and they're thinking that they've got a book I remember there was a book once, What the Plus. It was called What the Plus. I don't think I actually ever read it, but some influencer put it out. And it was actually, the title was about, if you remember, Google Plus. Google's foray into social media. Do you remember that? It died a death.
Yeah, it's gone.
But that's not to say, like, the thing is with those books, they have to be executed quickly, and you have to have a good marketing. You just need to be on it.
Well, I mean, there's also lots of diet things that have been debunked, right? Like whether it's the Atkins diet, whatever, that sold loads of books, and then they realize it doesn't, it's not quite as effective as first advertised, and they, no one picks those books up anymore. Things do move. I think if you make it so specific in one space, which yours isn't, then you're at risk of just science and understanding moving on.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I mean, I remember I read, what was it called? It was something about, The Tao of Physics. Really interesting book, actually. It was a book that I'd always wanted to write until I realized it had already been written, which is the intersection between Eastern spirituality and modern science and quantum physics and personal development, effectively. Because I studied all those things and I saw the overlap between all of them, and actually how they were all saying somewhat the same thing without actually saying it the same way. And then I read this book. I
can be honest with you and say it's never a book that I thought about writing, if it makes you feel any better.
Yeah, well,
I'll leave that to you, Harry.
I like to show people that we're all looking at the same coin, but from different sides. And I read this book, and it was essentially saying that. However, it was written in 1970 something, and the physics has moved way beyond that now. In fact, a lot of the theories that we're talking about were kind of, had been evolved in something else. So, there's a challenge as you write a book that it is going to get outdated. That's why there's not a right or wrong way. If you've got a book inside of you, you go for it. I mean, my first book, like I said, was a bit of a download. The second book, the process I took, was because it was with a co-author. We divvied up the chapters, and we each wrote a chapter and reviewed each other's and everything else. Or maybe I wrote a little bit more, I think, but he took on the publishing arm of it. And then the last book, I think I had ideas because I already knew what went into the leadership beat model. So effectively, each chapter was going to be something to do that. And what I did with that one from a practical point of view is I wrote the chapter headings up on an A4 piece of paper. And then I put all those pieces of paper up on I
remember you telling me this process.
Yeah, my wall.
Yeah.
So whenever I got an idea, I would write it on there. Or if I listened to a podcast, I would write, episode so-and-so, 35 minutes in, blah, blah, so that I could come back to it. As I had for about 3 years, all this paper on my wall. And then it was about putting it into a story a little bit. And also a lot of people say that my voice comes through in my books, which I also get when I'm speaking on stage, which I think is a really good thing. Sometimes it seems maybe a little bit unprofessional for some people, but that's usually people who are a little bit more stuck up. And I like to make people feel like I'm talking to them in the living room, right?
I think the challenge I'm finding on the Fear book, which is the working title, which might change, but I quite like it because I was inspired by, I've told you this before, Bear Grylls' book, which was Mud, Sweat and Tears. And he talks about, where he's, all the mud he had to face in the SAS and all the bits he's done. Because his book had such a profound impact on me, I wanted to write the new book as being Blood, Sweat and Fears. And it's about anxiety to action. But I think part of the challenge I'm having in the writing, I've written up to chapter 9 now, I haven't written the most challenging chapters, is you've got to write a book about fear and how to overcome them. But in doing so, I've got to overcome my own. My own in the sense that I haven't written a book before, so there's fears attached to that. Some of the stories I'm sharing are very, very personal and pretty traumatic, and I definitely risk judgment from some readers. Not everyone's going to resonate in a positive way necessarily because they're quite confronting, some of the stories. And there's stories that, despite being on this show and having, recorded 400 or 500 episodes of podcasts across 3 different channels, there's stories that people don't know about me. But I feel like if I don't include those stories in the manuscript, then I'm not being authentic. I'm not being true to my readership and the people that want to pick it up and read it, I think would expect the very minimum from the author, which will be to be honest about their own fears. So tackling that in the written word and sort of opening up the Pandora's box that you lock away in your head to keep you safe has been an interesting and cathartic, therapeutic, I don't know, confronting process. And you'll know some of those stories because we're friends, but our listeners don't. And then you sort of go back to Stoicism a lot. The obstacle is the way. The idea that the impediment to action advances action. I've got to go, okay, that's an obstacle I have here. If I come across an obstacle in my writing, I have to think to myself, as my whole thesis dictates, that's a signal. It's telling me this matters, and therefore it needs to go on the page. But I know that you'll know when it's out there and it's published, it's out there. There's no retraction. There's no, I can take it back now in quite the same way. So it's just me getting to grips with some of that. And I feel confident in doing so, but it does slow down the writing and it makes you more of a perfectionist in your own words. And I think when I get around to the proofreading element, when I've actually finished the first draft, if you like, because what I've done is I've written each chapter without proofreading as I go. It's just written, I'm leaving it there. So when I come back to it, I'm coming back with fresh eyes. So when I finish the raw manuscript, I think that the proofreading element is going to be quite confronting and quite challenging. But on the back, on the other side of that, hopefully it means I'll end up with a really good book that helps a lot of people. And whilst it may, not be everyone's cup of tea because of the stories that I talk about, I'm sure for some people it'll be really helpful. And I guess it's focusing on the impact rather than the judgment.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that people judge, but also they're judging themselves a lot of the time, and you're not going to please everyone. You can't be thinking like that. And also people move on, right? I think about the news cycle and how quickly it moves, and how the biggest thing in the world is a footnote. Like, even I was thinking for the poor people in Gaza, right? Now, no one's talking about Gaza. Supposedly there was a ceasefire, but yeah, I'm sure there's been at least 300 people killed since that. And yet now, and then also Ukraine, right? Forget that. That's way old news now, right? That's been going for 4 years. Even and so there's only a certain amount of bandwidth that people have, and so they kind of move through it. And that's not to take anything away from those horrific situations. But my point is exactly that: is that they should be impactful. But the reality is, if you've got 100, if your focus is 100%, and you've put 100% into one thing, and then something else comes along, things have to move, right?
So, I agree. And I always go back to what you said as well. No one can make you feel anything. As you said, it's funny enough, the last chapter, is it last chapter? I think it is in the Payroll book. The last chapter, the last subheading of chapter 2 is the mirror revisited in the Payroll book, not the new one. And that's talking about, as you mentioned, it's like holding a mirror up to yourself and realizing that some of the things that we feel about certain incidents is because of how we feel ourselves, whether that's nurture, nature, previous experience. And as you can never really make anyone feel anything, right? It's our perception of what that thing is. So you could say something, Lucy could say something, I'll be more offended by Lucy than you, and yet they're the same words. Like, they're just words. They're just, it's just a voice. It's just the way we interpret a sound, but that interpretation is everything. It's everything in terms of how we feel inside.
They say in NLP, I remember it from 15 years ago when I did my training, if you spot it, you've got it. And I think that's a really important thing, because it sounds, again, a bit of cliche. And what does it really mean? It means in order to recognize something in someone or a situation, you have to have knowledge of it. You have to have experience with it. And I was thinking about this the other day with, I think there was an incident. There wasn't an incident, but I was wondering why I was getting a little bit irritated with someone. And I was thinking, actually, it wasn't them and it wasn't the thing. I think I was using them as an excuse for why I wasn't doing something, when really it was a reflection of me saying, actually, whether that person was here or not, I'm blaming them for me not doing something or not being where I want to be or whatever. But actually, if they're not around, I'm still doing that situation. So it's not them that's stopping me, right? I'm using that as an excuse. And that's what jumps into my head in that, like, those spotty, you got it, all of those sorts of phrases. So it's interesting holding up the mirror and, like, what is it? One of the meditations I often use is, there's 4 from this Vortex meditation pack that I've had for about 15 years. And one is about relationships and how we have to have lots of different types of people in the world, because we need those people to have different ideas. As I think I've said before, if we all believed and thought the same thing, we'd all be living in the same place, wearing the same clothes, going to the same job, right? So we need differences, and it's about understanding that. And even the chapter I was reading today in my book, I think I've mentioned it before, The Greatest Salesman in the World, that I read today.
Every year.
I normally read it in my head, because each chapter's around 3 pages. But today I decided to read it out loud. And obviously it resonates a lot differently when you read it out loud. You really soak up the words. And today was chapter 2, and it was about greeting this day with love in the world, and seeing love in people and situations, and, loving the poor and loving the meek and loving the wealthy and loving whatever. And I thought about that today, especially because I had a tradesman coming around to fix something in the house that they'd come around to do, but they did a bit of a crappy job with it before. And so the doorbell rang, and just as I was about to open it, I did that pause that I think I've talked about before, where you just take that pause at certain points in the day, thinking about how I want to be with that person, thinking about the book as well, and then making sure I had that smile on my face and welcomed him in and did all this. And it was all fine in the end, but it set up a way for me to interact with them, rather than them getting annoyed with me because I haven't paid them the full amount yet, so I was waiting then to finish, all sorts of things.
And all of it, I mean, we're both fans of Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius, but it's like the idea of not being owned by your emotions. And that's what I'm going through in my writing, right? It's like sometimes if I'm distressed by something external, it's not the thing itself it's troubling me, right? It's my judgment about it. It's like, I've just got to come to terms with that. And I'll always go back to the things you say it a lot on the show, which is nothing means anything but the meaning you give it, right? So it's just me going, I'm going to put the words out there, and there we go. And if you're aggressive about those words or unhappy with them, that doesn't mean I have to take that interpretation on and wear that. That's like, you can waste loads of time trying to arguing about what a great person is or what makes a better man or human or whatever. The key actually is just to be it. And as you said, time moves on. And that was some of the things that happened in that book were sometimes decades old. And you just think, well, I'm in a different space now and we're moving on. But there's no denying that some of those stories have influenced the person that I've become since. And it's about finding those positives in sometimes quite traumatic incidents. And for some, they'll read it and go, don't find it necessarily that traumatic, because they may have been through something in their own lives that is by comparison in their minds worse, indifferent, whatever. So I do find it, but it's been a really interesting experience writing. I will say that I've become addicted to it. I think you have as well. You've written a lot of words. I've already got ideas now. If we go back to the Payroll Pivot book, Invisibility to Influence, because I've woven in so much of the fear theory, I feel like now I could easily sort of use a lot of those chapters to rewrite more words like the career pivot, the leadership pivot, even the parenting pivot, or something along those lines, where it's just bringing it to some of the concepts to broader audiences, a bit like the inner game of tennis. I don't know if you know Tim Galloway's written the inner game of work, the inner game of golf. The theories are the same. I've got all of his books, and they're always interesting in terms of how we look at things, and see them slightly differently. So I'm hoping this has very much been the year where I start to really dive into my writing, and hopefully I improve as I go.
Yeah, it's an intense task, not necessarily good for one's health, I have to say.
No.
It's sitting at desks and sitting at screens. Although I do have other book ideas in me. There's one I think I may do. I'm not sure if I'll do it as a short book or maybe as a book for students as well. But it's all about public speaking, and it's based on a blog that I had where I came up with a framework for speaking, which is having spice, spark, and heart. And they're all acronyms for things that you want to put into a speech, whether that might be repetition or a callback or whatever. So each letter stands for something, a story, whatever. So that might make a good book. I think I want to do a bit of a memoir-y type book, even though a lot of my books have got a lot of personal history in them, but maybe a bit more of a memoir one at some stage. And, for those listening, I think I suspect non-fiction is an easier avenue than fiction to go through when it comes to writing a book. But
I would agree, yeah.
There are courses that you can go on. I actually went on a book writing course years ago. This was after I'd written my first book, so it wasn't so relevant to me. But I took the manual and everything from that, and I actually used that to help my girlfriend at the time write her book. And I can't remember all of it, but it was a really good way of deciding to write books. I think she came up with maybe 10 ideas for what the book could be about. And we narrowed it down. I think it was about new yoga teachers, right? Good advice to new yoga teachers. But one of the things in order to understand what chapters you need to write, which I thought was really good, is that you write down, let's say you want to join the gym, right? Or you want to get fit, you want to do your first Ironman, let's say, right? You write down 10 questions that you would have about that process, right? And then you turn the answers to those into the chapters effectively. And I thought that was really good. And that could be a really simple way for people to get started with writing their book. It's like, think about something you know well about. And if you were starting it today, what would be 10 or 12 questions that would really move the needle for you had you asked it, like when you started, and make those into your chapters. And that would be my advice, is to start with some process like that.
I don't think my advice would be too much different, really. I think some of the process I followed for me, is I've tried to make virtues the foundation. So tried to identify the character strengths, the things that, decisions I've made, why I've made them, why behavior and what's important to me makes a difference for me, and people can resonate or not. I think to do that, you've got to be really self-aware. So again, you could still use the Ironman example. Like, why am I doing the Ironman? Understanding the purpose behind why you're doing it in the first place, rather than just the tools of doing it, because everyone's going to have a different sense of purpose. And actually, it's purpose that gets you to the finish line more than the nutrition or anything else. You've got to have a real clear reason as to why. And then you've got to be really aware, be self-aware of your limitations, your own values, your strengths. Are they aligned with your actions at the minute? So if you want to get to an Ironman thing, but you've got kids and you've got other responsibilities, how do you fit that in? Understanding that people reading it have got the same kind of thing. I think there's also going sort of beyond the external validation as well. So the idea being that it's about internal satisfaction, not necessarily getting the time with Ironman that makes everyone else feel happy. Again, linking it back to your why. Why is this important for me internally? Why am I writing this book? I think on the fear one, I've had to remind myself a lot, why am I writing this? Because some of this these are quite difficult stories to write. And I know that I'm putting myself out there to be judged. So my why has to be really, really important. My purpose has to be really, really clear. I think if you get to that point and you're willing to, I think the key here is if you're willing to write it as if no one would read it, you're not chasing the money. Your money will chase you if you get it right. That if only you read it, Harry, or only one person read it, or whatever, had it for me, I would like my book to impact one person. That'd be great, in one of my stories, to take an action. Like, that's more important. I think then it comes from a place of more authenticity. And then I think that really helps you create those 10 questions. I think you need those questions. You better answer them. But otherwise, I think you go into a place of going, I don't know, it's surface level. We can go deeper with the questions. Are you writing a book that you'd be happy if no one bought it? But it's more about the success of achieving what you set out to do, which is writing this book, not because you want it to be a bestseller. I mean, let's be honest, the Payroll Pivot, it's always going to have a limited audience, right? And I'm aware of that. It's taking me 18 months to write it.
These niche books might actually do much better than a mass market book. I mean, I certainly went with that approach in terms of my books, is that would I be happy having written it if only one person bought it? And the answer is yes, right? Sometimes I have this weird kind of fantasy where I think, imagine, like, let's say, like, my book, right, it sells 100 copies, right? 200 copies, right? Most books, by the way, sell less than 5,000 copies, right? 99.9% of books sell less than 5,000 copies. But let's say you sell 50 copies, and then there's some sort of world apocalypse where everything pretty much gets destroyed, and then a future generation, rises up, and then my book becomes almost like the Bible, right? Because there's only that book, right? And that is the history. Oh, right, how to be healthy and how to be good, right? I'm like, well, actually, then that will change the world, right? So I never know what's going to happen to that book, right? Just the fact that it might have not sold millions of copies today.
Lots of books sell millions of copies. Post, after you pass away, right? I mean, same with musical artists as well. Exactly. I mean, a lot of people, Eva was named after Eva Cassidy, but she sold more records after she died than when she was alive. You never know, bud. Sometimes these are the things that suddenly shift. In fact, if you think about books like The Obstacle is the Way, which I mentioned earlier, that book didn't sell anything when it was first launched. He went to about 17, 18 different publishing houses. They all said no, self-published. And then it was about 10 years later, I think someone famous read it and quoted it on a podcast, something like Stephen Bartlett or something like that. It was, I don't know if that was the show, but it was quoted on a show. He talks about this in his podcast. And it just went viral. And it was just because someone famous had mentioned it on this particular thing, and then everyone found, and now it's sold millions of copies. So you never know, mate. It just needs someone to pick it up. And
I'm hoping for something similar, right? Because you don't know. I mean, even like, what was that book? Oh, I had never read it or watched the movie. I think it was 50 Shades of Grey, which was, again, self-published and then got picked up and then suddenly became this worldwide phenomenon. I think it tallied in with people reading on Kindles as well. So all these women were able to read their steamy novels on the tube without feeling quote unquote judged. So I think there was a perfect storm of things to bring that into light. I don't know if it was well written or not, but yeah, you just don't know. And Rich Dad Poor Dad, that book, which I like. I think he was selling that out the back of his car for many years.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah. So, what is a book? Even what it is with a book, though, is that once it's done, even though it might be dated in some ways, it's timeless. It's there. It's ready. It's ready. So if someone does pick it up in 10 years' time,
there's a bit of legacy in there, isn't there? Having an impact on the world.
I wanted something that my nieces and hopefully my children one day, if I have them, God willing, would be able to pick up and read. Right. And
I mean, you can in your book. I'm not convinced either of my kids will pick up the Payroll Pivot and read it. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll read the fear one.
Maybe not that one, but the other one maybe, right?
What I loved about your response, though, Harry, just to bring it back, so I thought it was really interesting that you said, and really lovely actually, was you mentioned that in your post-apocalyptic version where suddenly your book is found, at no point, and I think this is really important because I think if you mentioned it earlier, less than 5,000 copies is 99% of people that publish books. If you're following this journey to write a book because you want to be a best-selling author that makes millions of pounds, I would suggest probably having a rethink. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think it's the wrong motivation. What I loved in your response was, if they find it then I could genuinely have an impact on the world. That's a way stronger purpose. Not once did you go, because then I'd be rich and I'll have this, that, and the other. It's never, and I know you well enough because I know that's not your motivation. It's certainly not mine. Funny enough, all the proceeds my payroll book makes is going into my community benefit company to help disadvantaged kids access sport here in the UK. So I won't see anything out of that, even if it does become the bestseller that maybe it could be as a niche book. But I think that's the point, right? It's the purpose is bigger than the profit. And if you're really compelled to write, and my dad made me do it. It was one of his last things he asked me to do. Not ask, but said it was one of his regrets that he didn't get to read it. It was like, right, I've got to make sure that happens now. And I'm really excited that I've started the process, and it'll be an emotional day, I think, when the fear one actually lands.
Yeah, and I think for those who I reckon there's at least 15 of our listeners now, if not more, who have actually written a book and it's sitting on their hard drive, on their laptop, half finished or 95% finished. Don't wait for things to be perfect, right? Just get it done, right? The cover's not maybe going to be perfect. I even noticed in both my first two books, I haven't yet noticed it in my third one, but I noticed it maybe years later, a couple of typos. And I'm not sure how they made their way. But also I've noticed that sort of thing happening in very famous, properly published books in times as well. So things aren't going to be perfect. And so don't wait for this.
Perfection is the enemy of progress, right? So
I say perfection is the enemy of action. And so I think I kind of got over that idea of perfectionism a while back. Sometimes it creeps up here and there, but also like when it came to, for example, this tradesman today. So it was just about refitting these blinds, which weren't quite right. And I was thinking about even our podcast as I was looking at his work afterwards, or even just during. And it was, he tidied up, but as soon as I went over, I noticed still some rubbish like tucked in somewhere or whatever. And I was thinking that a lot of the time people are just not fully present and not fully there when they do their job. I just want people who are there. I was actually in Dunelm today because I was buying some sheets, and the guy, I wanted to say to him at one point, "Are you all right?" He looked like someone who wasn't stoned at the time, but like that kind of someone who smokes a lot of weed, probably, who's just a little bit not there. Yeah. And often I just find that I'm looking for people who are paying attention, right, to their craft, to their work, to look at a job and see, okay, it's not, oh, we're not going to get it perfect, but have I really done the best job here? Have I really focused on it? And sadly, I find that sometimes I'm not seeing that as often as I'd like. And then I reflect
And you can,
me as well sometimes.
I agree, man, but you can find purpose in the most meaning, the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like repetitive of tasks. If you understand the reason why you're doing it, if it's to support your family, it could be around, if it's just having a good community. I mean, a good example of this, I think, is watching like Superstore. I don't know if you watch that. It's a US show. My son absolutely loves it. Right. They're all relatively menial tasks they do in the job, but there's so much more meaning to the work because they love the people they're working with. It's the stories, it's the relationships, it's all those things. And how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And I think if you're in a job and you're just not bothered, like time is going to go slower. You're going to, it's time to just.
I say that phrase to my students every single time, right? Because I ask them to get the room silent. I don't know if I've shared this with you before or not, but to get the room silent.
No, I don't think so.
I normally say, because I don't want to shout out for quiet. And this works really well in 99.9% of the classrooms I do it. I just say, I'm going to just put my hand up nice and high like this, right? When I put my hand up, put your hand up, because we all face different directions, but more importantly, go quiet. But then I say, look, don't put your hand up like this, where you just hold it up to your shoulder or like little finger up. And I say to them, right, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you can't be bothered to put your hand up, it tells me that you can't be bothered somewhere else in life as well. And so I think like when you're doing a job, whatever it is reflecting how you do things elsewhere. And often the point of doing the job is not, I think we shared this phrase before, which I like, right? The point of doing the dishes is not to get them clean. The point of doing the dishes is to do the dishes. And I think when you understand that it's the art itself, it's the craft itself, it's the journey, as it were. It's not the outcome, because the outcome is fleeting, it comes and goes. And it's like many things in life where you need to have, I guess, purpose in the process.
Well, I mean, the line, we talked about that line probably in episode 6, way back a couple of years ago when we started this show, and we brought it up. We talked about Johnny Wilkinson talking about him finding purpose in washing the dishes as much as he did scoring the winning goal in the World Cup. And he talks about that in his, on the High Performance podcast. Well worth checking out. It's an old episode now, but if you're a fan of Johnny Wilkinson, it's a brilliant episode. But the line I always remember when we were talking about that episode, it's I think it's just a brilliant line. I think it's in The Breakup, the name of the movie, which is with Jennifer Aniston.
I love that. Yeah, I want you to want to
wash up. And it's like, that's the thing. It's not about the washing up. I want you to want to do it because it means something to me that you're doing it. It's the whole, it's not about the task. It's about what the task represents. And we miss that.
I do love Vince Vaughn movies.
Vince Vaughn, that's it. That's the other guy, yeah. He's
Vaughn.
good.
I rewatched, I think, Dodgeball the other day and The Internship. And then I think there's something coming out soon with him in that he's a completely different style of character. But I like his early noughties or mid noughties.
Yeah, I like Vince Vaughn. He plays the same character in everything he's in, but he owns it. It's very much him, right? It's good.
I mean, for me, a lot of the time, I've been finding myself wanting to watch light-hearted things, and a lot of the time that's with my mum as well, because she doesn't want to watch anything heavy, so I can't really even watch a thriller or whatever, because she wants to watch comedy, she wants to watch light-hearted. So often I just find myself rewatching things I've already seen, and things with like him in there and Owen Wilson, things like The Wedding Crashers. Yeah, all of those.
Love Wedding Crashers. Will Ferrell as well is a favourite.
Well, yeah, they're highly rewatchable. So I love them.
But that's also about great storytelling, right? I was watching. I'm going to butcher his surname. Is it Zach Galifianakis? Or I can't quite get his surname.
Yeah. I watched something.
I've been watching his roast. I saw one on Instagram the other day where he's talking to Ben Stiller, and he just says to Ben, do you think your parents would be disappointed you didn't follow them into comedy? And it's just like Ben Stiller ends up walking. I'm sure at stage he walks off set. Yeah. It's just he delivers it with such. Oh, it's so good. I don't know if you haven't seen his roast. They're very good.
His interviews between two ferns or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I think I actually watched a movie with him the other day, an old one with him and Robert Downey Jr. called Due Date. Not the best movie, but it was somewhat enjoyable. I think I was watching it because I was laid out with my back, which actually is still problematic 2.5 weeks in. However, I went for acupuncture today, and it feels, it knocks me out when I go for acupuncture. I wanted to just fall asleep, but there's a community acupuncture place, so you can get it for quite a decent price. And I've only been back a few hours, but I'm like, oh, it feels good. I'm going to do it once a week for the next 5 or 6 weeks, and also do some other treatments. It's definitely improving day by day, but it's so painful when you've got a back. I mean, your health or your life or your age is the age of your back, as they say, right? Whatever age your back is, that's what age you are. And honestly, when your back is out, it really feels like you can't do much. Everything revolves around it, you know.
I've pulled my calf again, which is a recurring injury that's gone and once again, which is quite frustrating. But that side, I've got a paddle match at 6 a.m. in the morning, so I'm gonna have to strap it right up and hope it holds, which probably isn't the wisest move. But it's too late to cancel the game. I tried today, and it doesn't let you with a 24-hour cancellation, so everyone else will lose their match. So I'm going to strap it and play anyway. But hey ho, these are times when we get older, you get injuries, you got to try and probably should rest.
I mean, my friend was sending me, he's just joined David Lloyd's, and I think they have this fancy new machine there that tests your age in various ways, from flexibility to this, that, and the other. And he was a bit mortified because he's a big lad, right? He's 6'4", played a high level of rugby back in the day. He's still into sports. He did one of the hardest Ironmen. Can't remember which one it was. I want to say it was in Norway somewhere. It was a cold one. And, you know, he's a big guy. He did it much slower than you, but, you know, he still did it. So he's always been into physical fitness. He's not been really great with his diet, if I'm honest. And he still has a knack for having way too many canned drinks. But he sent us the results of, I think, his flexibility test, which is shocked him. Right? He's my age, 48, and he was 65, I think, for flexibility. Wow. 65. And something else threw him off. But then today he sent another one, and I think chest strength was 38 years old, legs was 36, and core, I think, was 46. So I think he was a lot happier with that result. But I think I told him if I got tested today, I think my flexibility would be around 85 years old. So I was like, don't worry too much.
No, well, there is a thing about how we're feeling on the day of the tests and what elements we've got, right? You'll always get a slightly different result, probably. Yeah. But, well, look, it's been a good chat. I'll be really interested to find out if any of our listeners have got a book inside them, like what that book is. Either let us know a title, let us know if we've hopefully motivated you to get started. I would say it's been a phenomenally exciting experience, and I've enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. I'm really excited to get my first book published on Monday, which is hopefully all going well. That's when it'll be out. Book cover designs all signed off, manuscript signed off, so we're just in the final throes now. And look, I recommend it. It's when it's out there, it's out there. So yeah,
it's going to be very successful as well, because you're very well known in that industry and a thought leader and someone that people
in that space. Yeah, but it's been I think it's cathartic. I think if you've got a book inside you, like don't you never know what's around the corner, right? You don't want to be on your deathbed thinking, I wish I'd done it.
No.
So failure heals, regret lingers, and you don't want that. So if you've got that there, no, it was the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, the second best time is today, something like that.
Yeah, 20 years ago, or whatever this phrase is, second best time today. And I think it's good words, and the words of Nike, just do it. Right? Don't overthink it. Just do it.
Mic drop. Good stuff. All right, Harry. Well, look, I will. Next time I speak to you, mate, it'll be out there. So we'll see how the reaction is to the first one, and we can crack on with the second.
We'll be holding up a copy next week, and we can see it.
Yeah, I'll do that. That'd be fun. Well, look, I hope you have a good week. I hope your back recovers sooner rather than later.
On the mend, and I hope you have a good paddle game tomorrow. I need to get into that. Once my back is sorted, I'll be on the beach with paddle courts here in Brighton.
Yeah, if not, mate, we'll partner up sometime in London just for the crack. Yeah, good stuff. And thank you, listeners. Remember, you can find us at mindful_podcast, pass_podcast on Instagram. Check us out there. Follow us if you can. Leave us a link, a follow, comment if you watch this on YouTube. Any comment is good. Just, hey, enjoying it, guys, because it really helps the algorithm spread it to further places. Subscribers are building. So I hope if that's one of you, thank you. Leave us a comment, leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform, and we'll hopefully catch up with you again real soon.
Take care, everybody. Have fun.
Cheers.